Hello and welcome to the Divorce View radio talk show. This is Joanie Winberg, certified human behavior consultant, divorce mentor, and CEO of the National Association Divorce for Women and Children. It's always a pleasure to do this show with my co-host, Rosalind Sadaka. Hello, Roz.
Hi, Joanie. Great to see you again this week. And I'm Rosalind Sadaka, divorce and parenting coach. I'm the founder of the Child-Centered Divorce Network for Parents, and very excited about the guest we have to talk to today. She is a former divorce attorney who is now a divorce mediator and coach, and she has a special perspective on divorce that I think is not only unique, but really valuable for everyone who's listening. So I want to introduce you to Lori Rosenberg. Why am I saying Rosenberg? I am so sorry, Rubenstein. And Lori, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I apologize for messing up your name.
That's okay, Roz. I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank you and Joanie for having me on. I'm really excited about being on the Divorce View. My background is 18 years as a divorce attorney, and when I got out of the divorce field, I really got out of it because I could see pretty clearly that being an attorney and working in the system really was not moving people forward in their lives. It really wasn't helping them, and I just didn't like being part of that, fighting all the time. You can imagine that, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I moved to another state and decided to just do mediation and divorce coaching work. And I'm so much happier because I get to do the part that I love, and that's work with my clients, but I don't have to fight in court. So that's nice for me.
And that's really important. I agree.
Absolutely, and I can sense that you're just loving what you're doing. And as a divorce coach, or one of the areas that you really focus on is forgiveness. And so today the name of our show is the #1 best thing you can do for yourself and your children is all about forgiveness. And so actually what we're going to talk about is forgiveness, heal for yourself, your children, and of course your future. A question that's just comes to the surface for me, Lori, is that people think when they're forgiving somebody that it's a sign of weakness. Do you see that or get that sense as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people think that they're being weak, they're being stupid, they're being foolish, that they're condoning somebody else's behavior, and that's a big one. People get stuck on that all the time, that whole like right-wrong thing, and when people really get that forgiveness is for them to find their own peace. I mean, I used to watch, and probably many of you did too who are listening to this, when I would watch those Oprah shows, and you would have the rapist, people forgiving a rapist or the murderer, and I would sit there and go, don't do it, don't let them off the hook. That's what I thought forgiveness was. I really thought it was like letting them off the hook, and meaning that what they did was okay, and it is not that. It really is a process of how to find peace within yourself and to really be able to release and let go of the past and that whole idea of wanting to change your past. Once we can accept our past, we can start finding peace.
So you have a fabulous story that to me probably took a lot of strength and forgiveness. Would you like to share with our listeners your story?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I was a child of a teenage mother, and my father was 21. And what I always say is my parents did not do parenting very well, but they certainly did not do divorce very well. They got divorced when I was 4.5, which is probably really why I went into the divorce field to begin with. I didn't want anyone to go through what I did as a kid. I would see my father every Sunday, and there would be this yelling and screaming and carrying on and arguing between the two of them, and it was like every single week I was exposed to them yelling and screaming. And then my mother got remarried, and we had a stepfather. And then they eventually got divorced. And then there was yelling and screaming between my mother and two fathers.
See, what a great influence.
And, you know, and a lot of it was, of course, you know, what I know now as an adult, you know, my mother not being able to forgive, my mother feeling hurt, and not being able to really move on because these other people did it to them. And once you're a victim, it's really hard to heal. It's hard to feel empowered, as you can imagine. So, you know, when I grew up, I was in that place of, I'm never going to get divorced. You know, I'm not going to be my mother. You know, tell God your plans and watch him laugh at you.
Mm-hmm.
And after 10 years of being married and having two children, I found out that my husband at the time was also having an affair, and we ended up getting divorced. So here I was, you know, sort of reliving my mother's life, and I was already a divorce attorney.
Hmm.
So, you know, I'll make this short, but I went about 3.5 years. I met my second husband, got remarried. We were married for 5 years. So by that time, I was already a step-parent to my first husband's children. Then I brought a stepfather into the relationship with my children. Second divorces, I don't know if everyone knows this, the second marriages end in divorce about 70% of the time, especially when there's children. And so, you know, I thought I was above all of that. Well, I wasn't. So that marriage lasted for 5 years, and then we got divorced. One of the things, and I probably should have brought the picture, but I have a picture on my website of this, is when about maybe five or 7 years later, when my kids were graduating from high school, I had my father, husband number one, husband number two, and my soon-to-be current husband, and the kids, and everyone slept over at the house. We had a fantastic time together. We have pictures of all of us together, which, you know, is one of those things for children of divorce. They never get to have a picture of their family, like, all together after the divorce. I really love that we have pictures, and we're able to talk. I mean, we're not best friends. I'm not saying, you know, I'm best friends with my exes at all, but I'm saying that forgiveness allows me to put aside my own personal hurts and pain and really step into a place of giving my children what they really need, which is their fathers.
I love your story, Lori. I love your candor. Thank you for sharing it. And it's so important for people who are listening to understand that a divorce attorney as a professional is still a separate person from the individual who is dealing with relationship issues and learning the way the rest of us are. But you used your wisdom, and after realizing that being an attorney wasn't the path for you, because I imagine you've seen so much of the discord and the craziness in the legal system that at the Child-Centered Divorce Network we're always talking about. You knew that coaching and one-on-one helping individuals make better decisions and choices was the right path. But what a wonderful person to do it with is someone who has had experience on every level. Your compassion for yourself as a child, your children, what they're going through, each of your exes, and understanding that everyone has their own perspectives, is enabling you to create a new dynamic. And that's what I really hope that more and more people will do, is break the boundaries and the definitions of what we should or shouldn't do in divorce and focus on the best interest of the kids and the family as a whole. So thank you so much, because what you're sharing is so valuable.
Definitely. Lori, I'm curious, with a situation like that, when you have your former come to like a graduation or whatever, and and maybe at that time when he brought in a third party into your marriage, did you feel the bitterness at that point and so forth? Because I think people are going to say, how did you go from that situation to all of a sudden, being able to be in the same room and communicating and taking a picture of the whole family? And I think that's where people really get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I think so too, and I can tell you, if you read my first story, I was part of I was in a book, had a chapter in a book called Transcending Divorce, and it was my story at the time, and that was maybe 2 years after my divorce, so I can look back at that now and really remember the feelings. So at one point, this is my biggest memory, right after I found out, I'm sitting on the floor in my kitchen, right by the cabinet. And I'm on the floor and I'm sobbing and I'm crying. And I am out of my mind devastated. Because I always said, as I said, I don't want to be like my mother, and I don't want to be a single mother, and I don't want to raise children alone. I mean, here I was, a divorce attorney. I know how hard that is. I never wanted to do that. And I really contemplated taking my life. And of course, that was, it didn't last very long, but there I was, on the floor, that devastated. And my dog, I had a German Shepherd at the time, came up to me and just started licking my face.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like brought me out of everything. And, it's like, I'm here for my kids, I'm going to be a good mother, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. But I had good friends, so I was very fortunate because I did have good friends, and I understood how to get through divorce because I helped people do that all the time. I just was really devastated that I didn't know. And that was, for me, I guess the number one hardship for me was I felt like such a fool. And I also felt like a forgiveness fake. I mean, I will absolutely tell you, like, I didn't know what forgiveness was. I mean, this was the time period where, as an attorney, as you can imagine, my life is about right and wrong. Right and wrong.
Black and white. A lot, I'm sure.
Winning, winning, winning.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when somebody cheats on you, everyone in your community will get behind you and say, oh yeah, he's such a jerk, I can't believe he did that to you, you poor thing. And they'll support you in this very negative way. So it's really hard to get over that when you're still thinking, I'm such a victim, I'm such a victim. Victimhood is the least empowering thing you can do. Mm-hmm. And so you realize that it's your choice to no longer be a victim, and it's your choice, like whatever life I was going to have, I needed to get going on it, and have my life, because if I'm waiting for him to come around and save me, it wasn't going to work. And I did that for a long time. I would talk to him on the phone and be like, I don't understand. Why did you do this? We were so happy. Like trying to get him to help me understand.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want your ex-husband to be your counselor.
Oh, really?
Good point.
Really good advice.
So the strength came from within, that you, because of being an attorney and seeing what divorce does or can really hurt a family and the children, and that's what we're always focusing on, the kids. Plus, you had the role model or the influence of your mom, so forth. So to me, that probably gave you that inner strength to really pull yourself up and say, okay, I've got to make this work.
Yeah, I mean, I really had to do that, and I could see. I remember telling my daughter that her father wasn't going to come home. She was 4.5 at the time.
Mm.
And she said, I don't want to get teary-eyed, but I remember her screaming with devastation. You mean we're getting a divorce? Like
At 4.5. 4.5.
Mother's a divorce attorney. So, and it was like the worst word you could come up with in her.
Calamity.
So now we had to make this as normal as possible, and we had a situation we agreed on, like a 40-60 split. He lived in the same town for many years. So, we just worked really well together. Their teachers knew what was going on. We would get the homework if there was left at each other's houses. We would do that. I would buy clothes for both houses. Um, I mean, we really put aside our stuff and worked for the kids. However, it really did take, I would say, about 3 years before I got to that forgiveness piece. And what actually happened was my second husband um, said to me, "You need to forgive him. You need to let go." And I'm like, "Well, what you did was wrong." And, so I was still holding on to all of that. And he's the one that explained to me that forgiveness brings inner peace. I totally didn't get that.
Nice. I'm Roz. I just had these questions that keep popping up, but
No, that's fine.
feel free. But I was just curious. Did your mom ever learn to forgive?
So really interestingly, she did, but I would say with my father, it took probably 20 years.
Wow.
And with my sister's father, I think it took less time. And she was like best friends with my sister's father's wife. I mean, they talk on the phone all the time, and I never in a million years thought that would happen. So, yeah, I mean, I have one whole sister, I have a half a sister with my mother and the second father, and then I have two sisters with my father and his second wife.
So let's get a little deeper into this concept of forgiveness, because I know it's very difficult for people to understand, especially when you feel so self-righteous in validating the fact that you were hurt, that you were done wrong, that someone really abused you. And a lot of the things that happen to people in life are, quote, unforgivable. They're having an affair and going off in addictions and abuses of all kinds. So I'd like to focus a little more on what it means for me as an individual to be able to let go of all of that anger and resentment and self-righteousness. And it's so easy to build. And as you said, our tribe, our community of friends and family support and reinforce this for us. So there aren't any people like you and me and other kinds of coaches who are out there saying forgiveness is an integral part of the process for you. Talk a little bit more about how people can benefit and move on in life by using forgiveness as a tool.
Well, one of the things I think that happens in divorce is that we're play out our childhood in some way. Not always, but very often. So, for example, my husband cheating on me brought me right back to that place of my father leaving us and abandoning us and rejecting us. In my mind as a child, all children are so self-centered, it's about them. So when my father left, it wasn't like this intellectual, he left my mother. It was, he abandoned me, he rejected me. And so I never healed that. So one of the things I did is, I looked at my divorce as a gift, not a tragedy, but as a gift to allow me to then heal this part in myself that was being triggered back to my dad. And once I get to heal that primary relationship in my life, the relationship with my dad, I can easily forgive my husband, and then also heal this part of myself where, so as a child, imagine as a child who is abandoned or rejected, what you're going to do is then start building walls around you so that nobody else could hurt you again. And And if you build a high enough wall and you're reinforcing it, and what you really want is love, and that's what we all want is love, but we're building these walls, and then we start blaming people for not being able to break down those walls to love us enough. What we do through forgiveness is it helps us take block by block and take that wall down so that we can then allow, because ultimately we know and we understand that our healing depends on us, not on someone else. It doesn't depend on them being sorry. They don't have to be sorry. They don't have to ask for forgiveness. You're not condoning their behavior. I mean, all those things. But I'm able to then say I'm no longer a victim. If I'm not a victim, I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes my way. So forgiveness allows you to do that. In my book, in the forgiveness book, I have a 4-step process in there. I call it Living with Forgiveness. We may get to it, we may not get to it, but it's really about building our forgiveness muscles. And what I love about that is you get to do it in every single area of your life. Once you learn the process, you can do it over and over and over again.
I was just going to say, I think we're thinking the same thing, Roz. Would you like to talk about your process, or at least get people to start to understand it, and then we want to make sure that they know where to go and find your book. But if you'd like to go into that a little bit more, Lori.
Sure. So it's a 4-step process, and what was so great about this is years ago, I mean, I really discovered forgiveness is the cornerstone of everything I've done from being a little girl to now. And that was my big aha while writing this book. So I used to do this 26-step process, and then it all came down to 4 easy steps. Step 1 is acceptance or acknowledgement of what the truth is, what really happened. And it's so important. I tell people this is such an important step, you can't skip this. Because if you're still blaming the other person, and you're not being realistic about the truth about what happened, you're not healing all the way. You're not healing from that place of integrity. The truth is really important. And we don't always know the truth because there's always a big spiritual thing going on that we may not know about, but we need to get as close to the truth as possible. Step 2 is taking personal responsibility for your peace. So I love saying, this is a great example. I'm not responsible for my husband cheating, but I am definitely responsible for my peace in the marriage that wasn't so good. And what I know now, what I understand now, my peace was, I was very controlling and very manipulative. So remembering, I grew up with a mother who went through divorce, and it was awful. So I want to control this marriage, right? I want to make sure this man doesn't leave. So I'm all controlling. Well, I acted more like a mother than a wife. My responsibility, right? It doesn't mean it's okay what he did, but that's my peace.
Mm-hmm.
Step 3 is to find the gifts or the lessons. So I just told you what the gifts or the lessons were for me, is understanding how controlling I was and being able to forgive my father for leaving. I mean, there were so many gifts. I could write a whole book on all the lessons I learned going through divorce. And so it's really embracing those gifts, and then you can sort of turn around and say, thank you for being that person for me so that I could learn all these gifts. And the 4th step is gratitude. Being in that place of thankfulness and of gratitude, and knowing that all these things that happen to our life, in our life, happen for a reason, and as long as we can learn, they're not a tragedy, they're just a gift. And we could be like, thank you for teaching me.
It sounds like freedom, that you just, like you said, you broke down that wall, you let it go, and now you're grateful and just free. To me now you just seem light and happy, where before, when you see yourself crying on the floor and thinking about taking your life, how heavy that was. And now, just from you saying that, I can't even imagine, because you're just so light and free at this point.
Right. And with that freedom, of course, comes the ability to move ahead and create a new future that you are taking responsibility for and creating. When we're stuck in that victim state, we have excuses why we can't do and be anything ahead, and it's like really putting ourselves in a self-imposed prison. And by doing what you did and letting go of the past and cutting those emotional ties to all the memories and the heartbreak and reliving the pain that so many people get caught up in. Once you do that, you really are able to step forward and use those gifts.
Right.
If we don't identify and see the past, there are gifts in every experience in our past if we look for them. And if we don't, which many people unfortunately do, we're just walking ahead and we're not gaining any perspective, and we're not opening the door to a happier future because we're bringing all that baggage with us, carrying it around relationship after relationship. So this is such an important concept. And tell us where we can find your book and the name of it again, so we make sure everyone knows Lori Rubinstein is the author of this book.
The book is called Forgiveness, Heal Your Past and Find the Peace You Deserve. And you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can get it through my website, LoriRubinstein.com. And you can get it on Kindle or Nook.
Correct.
So, and we're in the midst of doing an audiobook also, which is so awesome. I'm going to be working on it tomorrow, and we probably have just 2 more days to finish it up and get that out there too. So I'm very excited about that.
That's excellent, because to me that's another tool that people can be listening to this when they're driving.
Absolutely, and I have all these meditations in there, and there are even questions for book clubs. So, you know, if somebody has a book club and they want to talk, I have all these questions that you could discuss in your book club about forgiveness. I mean, we have it from so many different directions.
Now I know that Lori also is a coach for coaches. She coaches people who want to become divorce coaches. So she's very well respected in the arena of divorce, and is sharing her wisdom, which is so wonderful for a generation of divorce coaches to come out there, not only understanding the dynamics of divorce, but understanding the dynamics of forgiveness and this larger concept, which is so important for everyone to embrace. Can you tell us a little more about what you have coming up ahead for you and services that you are offering?
Sure. Well, if anybody is interested in becoming a divorce recovery coach, they can go to Impact Coach Academy, and that's out of Canada, but it's all by the internet, so people from all over the world can take the course. And Roz was a guest on the course last time, and hopefully will be a guest next time, which would be awesome. And I have a webinar coming up on healing the wounds from relationship hurts. That's August 26th, and again, you can go to my website and see that. And then there's retreats, and there's always workshops coming up. There's a podcast also, if anyone's interested, on iTunes. You can download the Forgiveness Teaching, called The Forgiveness Teaching, on iTunes. You can download that and listen to that in your car too.
Excellent, excellent. So if we're looking at the big picture here, and we're talking to our listeners, if you're thinking, oh, I just can't forgive that person for what he or she has done, this is trying to have you rethink this and know that to set yourself free, to feel happy again, that it has to start with forgiveness. I guess we've even talked before, is forgiving yourself, giving yourself a break, but then letting go and forgiving the other people in your life so that you can move on. Otherwise, as you talk about your mother, Lori, that she hung on to that for a long time, many years, and you could see the bitterness and the anger come with her. And that's a fine example of how a person will live and feel if they don't do the work and forgive. And I know it's hard at times, for people just can't imagine never doing that, but it's got to be. Correct?
Yeah, it is so sad when you meet somebody who has been holding on to anger and bitterness and resentment for 5, 10, 15, 20 years because you think, wow, you know, you could have been happy all this time. It's so sad. So I would just encourage anybody who is feeling those feelings, just make that decision. It starts with a choice. I'm going to forgive. I don't know how, but somehow I'm going to do it. You know, just say that. Just start with that intention, and then you'll find the tools. You know, whether you work with me or you work with someone else or you get the book, find the tools and get the help that you need.
Excellent.
And
And once
Lori,
again,
I just wanted to ask Lori, what advice do you have to tell parents who are in the divorce process or recently divorced and have children, being on the side of being a child of divorce, going and being raised with that reality, and also being a parent who divorced? What advice do you have for parents to safeguard their children in the best possible way?
You know, I'm so glad that you asked me that, and I know that this is your passion, right?
Yes.
Um, for me, it's all about not putting the children in the middle. I always say the divorce doesn't hurt the children, but what you do after the divorce, that is really what affects the children. I mean, I was going through a support hearing, you know, to get rid of all my child support, and my kids never knew about it.
hmm,
That is being a good parent. You know, you don't ask questions about the other person, you don't put your kids in the middle, and you don't allow any single adult in your life to talk about the other parent poorly in front of those children, because you remember those children are half of the other parent. And if you're putting down that other parent, all they're hearing is, you don't love me. There's something wrong with me. So when these kids grow up and they start saying, you know, I'm not good enough, and then they start looking for love in all the wrong places, we can go back now and see where parents were saying something to them in effect, you're not good enough, just by putting down their other parent.
excellent, excellent. That's what it's all about.
What it's
Thank
about.
you for that, Lori. That was very well put, and I think a great takeaway for everyone who's listening.
Good.
Absolutely. So I want to make sure they have your website again, Lori.
So it's Lori Rubenstein, and it's LORIRUBENSTEIN.com.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Roz, any thoughts you have yourself, words of wisdom to share?
Well, I think Lori really touched on so much of what the Child-Centered Divorce Network is all about and what I teach as a coach. I'm just delighted to have the reinforcement of someone who has her perspective to share this all with us, because I too believe that without forgiveness, we are denying ourselves a better, brighter future. And so it's worth letting go and remembering that forgiveness is not about condoning what the other person did. It's about cutting the emotional ties so that you are no longer hurting. And that's a huge difference.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Roz. As always, it's such a pleasure to do this show together and have such wonderful guests like Lori on our show. Also, we'd like to have our listeners know to learn more about Roz and her programs, myself and my programs, and just in general, and to see the other past shows that we've had. Just go to divorceview.com. While you're there, there's also 3 different free quizzes that you can sign up for. It's getting to know yourself. It's this one on stress, and then there's also about life balance. So feel free to take advantage of those as well. So thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully you walked away with some great information, took some notes. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week.
And thanks for
Bye-bye.
having me on.